what I first wanted to do is let you guys know that my talk today is actually on what exactly is unity and how do we walk that out. But I want to let you know that my perspective is in that horizontal place of being in between the community, the church, the nonprofit, and the business sector, but really standing in the community and looking at it from a community perspective. Also understand that I am and have been my entire life, since I was 7 years old, a Christian and a lay person in the church sitting in the pews. I am not a pastor, did not understand until several years into this that God had put a call on my life. And so I'm going to probably push your buttons a little bit today because I have the ear of people on the ground in respect to what the church is doing today. And I want you to know that I love the church, and I love the community, and I love nonprofits, and I love the business world. But we want to go deeper with that. We need to begin to understand some of the touchy issues that are there. So a couple of points I want to make. I'm just going to lay a scriptural foundation. I want to suggest that we have an identity crisis. We have an identity crisis within the church, both corporately and individually, and we have an identity crisis in the community. And I think that we all know that, but what does that look like? I also would like to suggest that we have difficulty having healthy conflict, which for anyone who's been married, as long as I have 28 years, I'm sure there's more who have been, you know that conflict is a part of relationship and how to actually do that and go about it. I would also like to say that our perceptions are not always based on reality. That when we initially meet someone and we hear what they do, it may not actually be, in fact, in most cases, it's not the depth of what they actually do. And finally, I'm going to suggest that we have a paradigm shift, that we begin to look at things a little bit differently, and then I'll do a conclusion from there. Ecclesiastes 4:9 is two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, the other person is there to pick them up, but pity anyone who falls and no one is there. If they lie down together, they can keep warm together. That's a plus. But how can one keep warm alone? Though they may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. And a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Biblically, there's scripture starting in Genesis all the way back when the Lord said it is not good for man to be alone, and he creates woman out of man for them to be together. There's Mark 6:7 where the disciples are being sent out, and they're being sent out 2 by 2, right? In Proverbs 27:17, we know that iron sharpens iron. And while that's scripturally there and we talk about that scripture, what does that actually look like when we walk that out? And I'm not going to repeat John 17 again because Kurt just did that, but John 17 and the unity scripture that we talk about, right? That being in unity with each other requires Christ and our relationship with him. We have an identity crisis. Operating in nonprofit, church, business sectors. I went to a thing in New York at some point, and they sat in the room and they split everybody up and they said, okay, intercessors sit here, church sit here, nonprofits sit here, and business people sit here. And they each had to write what they loved about the other one and what made them crazy about the other one. And it was very funny, and we'll do that exercise at some other time. But what was interesting about that is, I'm sure you've heard this, the church needs to come out of their walls. I'm sure you've heard this, nonprofits, you need to come under authority of the church, right? You're rebelling. Intercessors, I'm sure you've heard this, why are you guys so weird? They actually said that, I swear. And then from the business world, wow, you guys are super black and white. You're not very nice. You have all these goals and deadlines, and why can't you guys loosen up a little bit? That's sort of surfacey, right? Let's take it to the next step. How about women versus men, right? That debate that we're a little afraid to begin stepping on. How about black, brown versus white versus other colors of the spectrum? How about suburban versus urban communities? How about megachurch versus local church? And then this is some of what we see even deeper than that. How about sexually exploited ladies But how about some of those that grew up in a culture of submission? And is there a correlation between the power that we use in submission there and what it translates to when it comes to being exploited and even trafficked? That's an interesting conversation. How about when we talk about a wealthy person going in to help a poor person? Does the wealthy person not need help? Is it just the poor person? And how about a stay-at-home mom versus a working mom, right? Those are tense conversations. And how about homosexuality versus marriage? What does that look like? And then the last one from last night, how about priest versus pastor, right? Point 3, we're afraid of healthy conflict. We're afraid to have those conversations. And so here's my experience. When we bring people in to work with us and to bring the church on the ground and work on the ground, what we find is there's an excitement in the beginning. And there's an excitement to get involved. And then as we get involved, we get down to the reality of the difficulty of what's there, and we give up and we walk away. What the city says about the church is that at Christmas time, we actually will go down and feed thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and we will leave the trash everywhere, and we won't pick it up. And when someone tries to say, could you come over here and do that? We don't want to respond. We want it our way. And so we are afraid to actually, we've been looking at it as competition, right? And so the thing that we're finding out is that when you get into the depths of someone's soul, there is no competition, because God created each of us in his image. And if we're able to find out who we are in him and what our gifts and talents are in him to the depth of who we are and not at the surface, then what happens is we don't find the redundancy. How many times have you heard we have too many nonprofits, don't start another one? We don't. We have many, many gap areas in this city. And the reason we have many gap areas is because if you read a website, you will think that people are doing the same things. But when you get into the depths of what people are really doing and what they really want to do and what they're called to do, it's all very different. And God has created this amazing tapestry that we have yet to unplug. What we realized is that when someone comes into our organization, it takes them about 6 months to find out who they are. They come in with a certain expectation. They tell us what they want to do. They tell us what their strengths are. Maybe they've been in business and they've done all kinds of opportunity challenges, and they've done all kinds of strength assessments, and they've worked in certain areas, and then they get to the point where they're in tears and frustrated, and God does a breakthrough in them, and then they figure out what they actually are able to do. And so I want to conclude with this, that in order to have unity in the city, in order to have unity amongst all of the different areas, we need to build relationship, and we need to be willing to take those relationships to a point of uncomfortableness. We need to be able to have difficult conversations, but we need to be able to have loud debates too. And we need to be willing to go on the ground and do the work, but we need to commit from the beginning that we're going to do the work for the next 10, 20, 30 years in life. We need to take the perspective of, I'm going to spend an hour a week on ministry, to my life and my calling is ministry, and everything I do is ministry. And that's the way that we need to see it. And we need to learn to respect each other's identities and understand what those identities are and love people through those identities. And in the depth of unity comes our depth of action and long-term commitment. And through Christ, we can all get there.